our last panel. I'm very excited for this panel. And I will start by just introducing the moderator, and then he can give you some more info. So our moderator for this session is Jofri Issac. Jofri is a researcher at Royal Roads University and a recent Master of Arts graduate in Environment and Management. His research focuses on systems mapping of socio-ecological issues with an emphasis on food systems, energy poverty, and energy transitions in social housing. Jofri uses participatory approaches to integrate community perspectives and generate actionable insights. I'd like to now invite Jofri to join us at the front, and also all of our final session panelists. So Yasmin, Rowan, Margaret, and Emily, if you could please come up here as well. And same QR codes, so remember you have your QR codes on your name tags and on your tables, so please do submit questions. And over to you, Jofri.
Thank you, Dylan and Josephine, for allowing me to moderate this closing session. It's my first time doing this, so if things go sideways, you know who to blame. Yeah, I'm honored to be here, and I attended the inaugural session in 2023, and it's been 2 years, but it feels wild. It feels that a lot of things have changed, right? Baggy jeans are almost out of trend, but war, genocide, and autocratic leaders are back mainstream, right? So, yeah. Anyways, I think COVID feels like something that happens in late 90s. Okay, that's it. That's all. Anyways, I'm sure that you all had a great day today. Everyone enjoyed the session, like full of rich, thought-provoking sessions. And before I move on to introducing our panelists, I'll just give a brief intro of my work and my background. My name is Jofri. I am a research assistant at Royal Roads University, and my work focuses on energy policy analysis and specifically focusing on energy poverty and also just energy transition in social housing buildings. As Josephine mentioned, I completed my master's last year in environment and management, and my thesis focused on exploring local food systems planning in relation to climate, biodiversity, and health challenges in Comox Valley region on the island. I used systems approach, and it was an interesting experience. My introduction to energy justice and energy poverty was not planned. I used to work as a part-time housing support worker at transitional homes, old age homes, and low-income housing. And that's when I got the front seat to look at these challenges of homelessness and mental health issues and energy insecurity, and discovered that it's not an individual failure, but failure of systematic setup like this. People are set up to fail in this system. And around this time, I was fortunate to be associated with Just Energy Transition Project with Professor Runa Das under Community Housing Canada. And I'm really enjoying that work because I get to interview people, researchers, non-profit housing providers, and government representatives to understand the transition challenges to make it more fair and effective and inclusive. I'll speak a little bit about the results that we got and what we learned through that project. Through this project, we learned that old buildings aren't just inefficient; they are stories of long-standing neglect. And when we talk about retrofitting, it's easy to focus on heat pumps and insulation, but what we are talking about is transforming daily life, restoring dignity. One of the more sobering realizations was that health and well-being, the outcomes we claim to care about, don't drive the system, they reflect it. And if those outcomes aren't improving, something upstream is broken. We heard again and again about silos between departments, sectors, and funding streams. Not because people don't care, but because the system wasn't built for integration. That fragmentation delays good work and burns people out. Capacity, especially human capacity, has been a great problem. And it's not just an HR problem. They are structural indicators of a system asking too much of too few. Last, but the most important one, the stigma. The stigma around social housing isn't just external. It shapes how policies are written and how investments are justified and how residents are treated. If you don't confront that stigma directly, it becomes a silent force holding everything back. As we move into this next phase of research, we are looking to connect with more people, resident housing providers, and community organizations to better understand their experience. So if this is something that you care about and if you want to be associated with, I'll be happy to connect with you and hear from you. Another project that I want to share is the energy poverty analysis project that we did. It's an interesting project, and it's very much related to the discussion that we had today and we're going to have. We looked at all the energy-related initiatives in BC from 1989 to 2023, and we got some interesting results. BC has been a climate leader in many ways, but when it comes to energy poverty, there's still no comprehensive strategy, and we didn't even find mention of energy poverty in any of these initiatives. Since 2020, more municipalities and community organizations have stepped in, often building on Clean BC programs and tailoring them to local needs. Many of these efforts focus on vulnerable households, but more still prioritize homeowners, especially those who can afford major upgrades. We are beginning to see a change where more programs are now including indigenous communities, low-income households, and nonprofits. But those are still exceptions. What's missing are emergency supports, and crisis response programs are rare. Nearly 90% of new initiatives boil down to one thing: rebates or subsidies for heat pumps, efficient appliances, or home retrofits. It shows that we are still designing solutions around ownership, capital, and consumption. And in that model, energy justice gets framed as something you qualify for, not something you're entitled to. So that's a bit about the results that we got from our research work and about the work I'm doing. And let's move on to the incredible panel that we have. We'll start with the individual introductions. We'll start from Rowan.
Awesome. Can folks hear me on here? No. Is this better?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Thank you so much for opening us up, Jofri. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me today. I'm thrilled to be here with this absolute powerhouse panel talking today. And yeah, thank you to EcoTrust Canada for having us. My name is Rowan Burdge. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm an uninvited white settler on these lands that have never been ceded to colonial systems. I want to thank Elder Doris Paul for welcoming us today and setting us up in a good way and right relations to have this conversation. I work as the provincial director for the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. We're a coalition of about 85 member organizations across the province of BC doing anti-poverty work. As you can imagine, this is very broad intersectional work and encompasses many different things, from food security to housing justice to worker solidarity to supporting the enactment of the rights of Indigenous peoples. It's very broad. And I love the opportunity to zoom out a little bit and notice how these deep interlocking systems of power are working together to keep people struggling, even in comparatively wealthy and resource societies. BC is one of the richest provinces and one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and yet 1 in 6 children in BC are experiencing poverty currently. Of course, there's a disproportionate impact on lone parent households, racialized and Indigenous households, and families living with disabilities. Further, hunger in BC is on the rise, with the BC CDC data showing more than 20% of households in BC are facing hunger, again with disproportionate impacts on northern, Indigenous, racialized, remote, and rural communities. So the economic climate that we're in, the post-pandemic realities that we're all experiencing, the housing crisis, the poison drug supply, the rise of precarious work, these are really daunting things. And of course, climate change and extreme weather have really had deep impacts on people's quality of life and local food systems. Why is this person on an energy justice panel talking about food, you might ask? Because poverty is so much more than about just income. It's about the material realities that people are facing. Being poor is expensive and time-consuming. Poverty is about the time it takes to stand in a food bank line or wait for access affordable childcare, or to advocate for yourself as a patient with an expensive chronic illness, which is my lived experience. I came into this work as a young, queer, precariously housed, and at the time precariously employed type 1 diabetic who could not afford insulin and could not for my life figure out the complex medical system and insurance that seemed to make it so hard for folks to access just basic needs. I spent tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket on life-sustaining diabetic supplies because despite Canada having a universal health system, which is great, we do not have a fair pharmacare program for Canada. I also worked for many years in shelters and harm reduction in the downtown east side, which really deeply crystallized for me the impacts of systemic harms, of colonization, and the unrelenting war against the poor, rather than on poverty itself. We've heard a lot of wonderful and creative ideas today, and one thing that's really bringing me hope in these dark times is that we have a lot of collective capacity and power to change these systems. We can build pathways out of poverty, and something that I find really inspiring and hopeful is that poverty is actually a very solvable issue. When it comes down to it, the solutions are not actually that complex. There's easy policy fixes that exist, like targeted basic incomes, free and subsidized transit programs, actually enacting DRIPA and giving land and resources back that have been stolen. And there's, progressive wealth tax, banning billionaires, rent control. There's lots of very powerful policy ideas that could easily make lives materially better very quickly for people. And these things are really possible. The barriers that exist are things like political will, bureaucracy, the backlash against the redistribution of wealth, or even the idea of a public good. And I think, as Jofri said, the deep stigma against people experiencing poverty. But these barriers are all surpassable, and I think we can work in solidarity collectively to center those most impacted. People with lived experience always have amazing suggestions on how to make their lives better quickly, so we need to be centering people with lived experiences and material conditions in all of our work. We also need to be considering how policy solutions that we're talking about can be implemented thoughtfully with cross-movement solidarity, and so that they're not creating new problems or replicating harmful systems of power in the work that we're doing. I also want to make explicit the deep connections between poverty, climate resiliency, and public health, which we've been talking about all of those things today. The heat dome comes up over and over again as a good example of these intersections. The BC CDC data showed that 98% of people who died during the heat dome were experiencing material deprivation. Anti-poverty work is climate justice work, and we need to understand these connections and work from a lens that's realizing the impacts of poverty. Poverty debilitates people's ability to respond to climate emergencies, energy injustice, and extreme weather. The best climate justice tools for preventing needless suffering and death are poverty eradication measures, full stop. Many poverty reduction solutions are climate justice solutions, and they intersect with important issues like migrant rights, worker solidarity, and public health. A really great example is that a dignified, affordable public transit system would help address the murdered missing Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit crisis, support women and trans folks' safety in their communities, decrease emissions, and support people experiencing deep poverty to access food, all at the same time. How great is that? It's a win-win for many groups. And when we're considering more ethical and just ways to run our societies, we often find it costs less economically also in the long run to provide people with the tools and services they need to make themselves a good life. I look forward to exploring more connections between housing and energy justice, but I'll leave it there for my opening comments. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Hello.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. We have the pleasure of being the panel between you and cocktails. So we'll try to lubricate you up. Get ready for that. Hi, everybody. My name is Yasmin Abraham. I use she, her pronouns. I am president of Kambo Energy Group. Our organization has been around for 15 years and exclusively focuses on what's known in many circles as overburdened, hard-to-reach, vulnerable communities. We work with Indigenous communities, low-income households, and newcomers and immigrants. Started right here in BC, and over 15 years, we have expanded over Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and most recently into Washington and California doing this work. In that time, we have worked with 70 First Nations communities, 100,000 BIPOC households, and upgraded 3,000 low-income homes. And I share this because I want to express that all of our insights and recommendations comes from being in community, from crawling through crawl spaces, from sitting at the kitchen table, from air sealing homes. That's really my perspective that I'm bringing you today. I want to bring us back to energy justice. Because when I think of energy justice and when our organization thinks of energy justice, we think about fairness. And I'm a Libra, so it works well for us. Scorpio rising. But energy justice to me is that everybody, regardless of age, race, language, color of your skin, has the same opportunity to benefit and live in a safe, comfortable, energy-efficient home. At Kambo, we do work in energy justice, but we never use that term internally, ever. 85% of our staff, our 45-member team, are from the communities we serve. And for us, the work that we do is about making sure that participants in our programs look like us, that they speak the same language as us, that their parents come from the same country as us. And we don't think about energy justice as an abstract concept. It's a deeply practical commitment to ensure that people are represented in rooms like this and are equal participants in the programs we have. But here's the reality. 95% of the people that we work with have never applied for a retrofit program, and they all qualify. They are either unaware of the programs or they're too complicated to access. And this is not just an information gap, this is a justice gap, because if they can't access and benefit from the programs, they start to bear the brunt of the cost and the impact of climate change. So our work really tries to address this head-on by developing community-led solutions. I really want to encourage us to start to think about shifting our sector and considering that our sector has not been immune to the systemic bias that has happened across our society. Historically, energy retrofit programs have focused on energy efficiency. We have utilities that have been mandated to build efficiency across their entire grid. And so what we end up happening there is a little bit of energy is saved in lots of houses across our grid. Excuse me. So we see programs that are designed specifically to address efficiency. Most recently, we have programs that are designed to achieve GHGs, greenhouse gases, climate programs. And so we have things like heat pumps, we have things like fuel switching, which are also really important. But both of these approaches are really top-down. They don't consider the needs of the communities. I have been in lots of communities and done lots of community engagement, and I've never heard a community member say, I want a more efficient grid, or I want my home to use less emissions, unless you're at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, to quote Chris, because some people do say that. It was great. Not the communities we work in. What we hear is, my bill is too high. My home's too warm in the summer. I don't understand my bill. Why are the utilities trying to get me to use less energy? Don't they sell energy? I'm worried about my job security, housing security, overcrowding. And I think in this room especially, we know that climate and efficiency programs can address some of these issues very well. But we think about these as co-benefits. And they are co-benefits to us, but to the community, they are the primary reason they want to participate in our programs. And so I would really want to encourage us to stop designing climate programs with co-benefits and instead start to work with community to create education programs with a climate co-benefit, a housing program with a climate co-benefit, a workforce program with a climate co-benefit, because it starts to really center the needs of communities and will get better uptake from the communities that are really vulnerable and really feeling the negative effects of climate right now. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
That's a hard one to follow, oh my gosh. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Emily Armitage. Can everyone hear me okay with the microphone? Okay, awesome. So I am a lead organizer, a community organizer with ACORN. I'm going to explain a bit about what that is, what my role is, and then also, instead of doing a big backstory on all of the work, I'm going to focus on maybe one story that I think would be interesting for us to discuss here that relates to the work that is going on in this room today. I guess I'll start off by saying it is so amazing to be in a room with so many amazing policy experts from different backgrounds to connect on this issue. I'll be transparent, that is not me. As a community organizer and with ACORN, our skills are in bringing neighbors together in low and moderate income communities to build democratic grassroots neighborhood chapters where people can take on issues important to them and use collective action, direct action with their neighbors to make those ideas a reality. So ACORN, we started in Toronto, ACORN Canada, back in 2004, and have over the last 20 years expanded to, I think it's now 31 chapters across, I think 5 provinces across Canada, including an office here in BC. We are primarily organizing the unorganized, low and moderate income families, low and moderate income individuals, working class people who know that they're pissed off about issues that are affecting them and their families, but probably don't talk about that in the same language that we might use in this room today. So as a community organizer, my role is to spend the bulk of my time going door to door, sitting on people's couches, at their kitchen tables, hovering in the kitchen while they stir their dinner, to talk about what they would like to see changed in their communities, and then activating them, bringing them into the larger group so that we can plan campaigns that push those issues forward, so we can have the power to be at the same table as people who make the decisions, and our members can have a voice to advocate to those people. So one sort of story I'd like to share with you that I think illustrates an issue that I've heard a lot of discussions about in this room today. How can we, convince working class people that the issues we're talking about now are their issues? Because we all know that who's going to bear the brunt of the climate crisis? It's not wealthy people, it's low-income people, but too often, those are the people who are not being included in the conversations that we're having in this room. So a quick story that came up about 6 months ago. I got a call from a tenant in a building in Vancouver who wanted help organizing a tenant union in their building. From the perspective of, environmental activist or environmental policy worker, the story that I learned when I went to that person and helped them door knock the building might be a very positive one. A large landlord had bought up an older, sort of, falling apart apartment building in Vancouver, had invested a lot of money into doing green retrofits, into electrifying the building, and, as a result, the building was a lot, used a lot less energy, which was great. However, once I got there and began knocking on doors, talking to tenants, I learned that from the tenant's perspective, what had actually happened is that their old landlord who used to throw Christmas parties and give out gifts, arrange trick-or-treating on Halloween, who fostered a sense of community, had been replaced by a large corporate financialized REIT who had immediately undertaken 2 years worth of construction projects that drove out half of the tenants in the building because of the unrelenting noise. A lot of the seniors and people working night shifts couldn't hack it anymore and were forced to leave. And as a result, the average rents in the building went up significantly. The new electrified heating system the building had actually resulted in the apartments, unfortunately, being colder for the majority of people, probably because there hadn't been, similar upgrades in insulation. And to make it worse, the tenants were now wanting to organize because their landlord was passing on the cost of that retrofit to them through an additional rent increase for capital expenditures. So I think that's an important conversation to have in these rooms, because the people in that building walked away from that situation not feeling very, not feeling many lovey-dovey feelings towards the topics we're talking about today. From their perspective, the building being electrified resulted in their neighbors being evicted, their rents going up, and their apartments being colder. So a lot of the work that I do with ACORN is organizing people to have enough power that they can be at the table for these conversations, and by including those groups in the policies that we're talking about today, we can make sure that not only is their perspective not left out, but also that we're not alienating a huge class of people from the environmental movement, people that nowadays more than ever we need on our side if we're going to be able to push forward the policies that we need to, save the planet. Just a small undertaking. But yeah, excited to talk more about these topics on this panel. I'll leave it there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Margaret Wanyoike. I'm from CAN, Community Action Network, which is under Poverty Reduction Coalition. So I'm so glad because I'm having my boss today, Rowan, who have introduced everything that we're doing. And I'm so glad because to be here today, because when I just look like everybody, we are here to bring change. Like everybody is here because we want change of climate justice. So CAN is a program that I got into 2022, where we are brought together by the Poverty Reduction Coalition for the lived experience people, and that is where we got trained, and then they sent us to different directions, and that is where I am today because I'm a community advocate, and an advocate for the community in the city of New Westminster, being in among of the people lived experience, and I'm so glad to be here today. And this is a work that we should be doing. And I believe in change. I believe change that will, because we're here looking for the results of the change. Because I believe change can bring amazing work, amazing job in our country. So through the climate change, like climate justice, I've been being that person who is lived experience. I remember because I came here when I was pregnant during 19 days, and I was coming to seek asylum here in Canada, being that single mother with 2 kids and also pregnant. And I face a lot through climate change because there is this culture shock because I didn't know that there is climate change here in Canada. I got here when it was in August, that was on August, and I face a lot, and with that, I just, through the lived experience, through being made who I am today, because I always say that I was not Margaret, that is seemed to be here today, because I was that kind of a person who was hopeless, who didn't know that I'm gonna live by tomorrow. And I would thank BC Poverty Reduction for giving birth to CAN, which brought us this far, picking us all the pieces for us and making who I am today. Not only me, with a lot of people that they have done, or they have done the work on them so that we can be who we are today. So I'm so glad, and that is why I pick out all my pieces and I started advocating about the in community through the climate justice, also in housing, better housing and safe housing. And that is the work that I've been doing through sharing all this. I'm glad because we're gonna share a lot, giving us our lived experience through the climate justice, because we have faced a lot. We have faced a lot and we have to make it happen. So through Rowan, because she has just done an amazing job of introducing the work that we are doing. So I'm so glad and hope everything gonna be okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the introductions. Question period. Okay, I have a question. It's open to hands, like whoever wants to answer. How are you witnessing underserved and equity-deserving groups being left behind in the wider effort to decarbonize buildings and make them more climate resilient? Anybody? Yeah.
I can take that on first. Yeah, I think, in my work, we are seeing a lot of our members who are majority low income and moderate income tenants being kind of left out of the conversations. Oftentimes we're talking about their buildings without really involving the people who live there and not having them at the table or in the room. One sort of statistic I can share with you, this comes from a report that we're actually releasing tomorrow, so very timely, although it would have been better if it was today, I guess, is we did a nationwide survey of our members asking questions about tenant issues, also climate issues, and one of the key takeaways is that it seems when it comes to the climate crisis, tenants are paying twice. They're paying with the housing crisis, and a lot of the times they're the ones who are footing the bill for efforts to decarbonize. Some stats that I have here that I can share of the small percentage, something like 20% of the people we surveyed who had retrofits done in their buildings that would increase efficiency, over a third of them had been hit with a rent increase directly tied to that retrofit. So that's such a situation where it's not a private developer, it's not a government of any jurisdiction who's footing the bill for the climate crisis. It really is the low-income tenant who is ultimately paying the price. So that's not great. Another example of this, and this is kind of speaks to why we need more organized low-income people in the rooms where these decisions are happening, because they provide valuable insight onto these topics. We had a national campaign starting last year that was kicked off by my colleague organizing in Alberta. She had been organizing tenant unions in a lot of buildings owned by a large landlord called Avenue Living. Avenue Living had gotten, I think it was $150 million in low-interest financing from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, specifically to do green retrofits in all of their apartment buildings. The problem is that Alberta does not have rent control, and there was no affordability covenants tied to this funding. So Avenue Living, unfortunately, took the money from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank and also raised tenants' rents by an average of $600. That's per month, not per year, as the rent increase people were seeing. Some of our members in Alberta Avenue Living buildings saw rent increases as high as $1,000 a month. We found some documents that they were talking a lot about, retrofitting the buildings to make them use less energy, but also about upgrading their clientele, as in the tenants. They wanted to have a sort of more middle class tenant population versus the affordable apartments that they previously had. So I think those are two examples of how leaving low-income people, working class people out of these conversations can lead to these sorts of oversights. I'm sure the Canadian Infrastructure Bank did not intend to see all these tenants receive these huge rent increases, but without those people being part of the conversation, that's ultimately what happened. So, yeah, needs to happen on a larger scale, definitely.
There. Just to add to that, I think one important point there is that the money that Avenue Living got from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, those are taxpayers' dollars, right? It's not private capital. Those are taxpayers' dollars that is going to that. And I think that you speak so well about the importance of really bringing community to the table and not in we want to do a focus group, here's a survey, like truly bringing them to the table and designing solutions that address their needs and mitigate the risks. Anyway, but to answer your question, Jofri, I think one of the things that we see where people are being left behind is around just the lack of participation in these programs. One of the challenges is, we as Kambo, we work with hundreds of thousands of communities. So we have the qualitative and the quantitative data about who is and who is not accessing programs, but that data is not collected across federal, provincial, utility, local programs. I have my inklings of who's taking advantage of it, but we don't, as a society and as a sector, really, we're not taking that data. And other jurisdictions, especially in the US, which I will mention them, there's a lot of really progressive jurisdictions down there that are taking that data and mandating that 30% of this program the participants must be from vulnerable communities. And it forces program design, it forces program implementers to do the thing to meet that goal. And I think that's a real opportunity in BC to ensure that the programs that we do have are being uptaken by the communities that are most vulnerable.
So I have a follow-up question that's on Slido. Can you clarify more on Kambo? Is Kambo a charity, and can you also explain what social enterprise means? Yeah. You got a question?
Oh, this thing keeps going. Yes, Kambo is not a charity. We are a social enterprise, so we consider business as a tool to do good. We have been running for 15 years. We also run a nonprofit that has more of a policy angle to do that work, and that's called Create Climate Equity. We're a family-run business. My dad started it 15 years ago after working in the utility sector for 30 years and seeing that, there's a huge opportunity to do things better. So thanks for the question, whoever that was.
Thank you, Anonymous. Okay, Rowan, I have a question for you. How does energy poverty and justice work? Issues overlap with wider housing crisis and basic human right to a safe and comfortable home?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. I'm really happy to talk about this. So in BC, affordability and the housing crisis isn't just about rent prices. It's also about whether people can afford to heat their homes, as we've been talking about today, cook their food, and keep the lights on. Energy costs are a hidden burden, especially for low-income households, particularly in older and poorly insulated buildings, as we've all been talking about today. People often face what we call heat or eat decisions, which is having to sacrifice food or medication or other essentials to stay warm or to stay cool. That's energy insecurity, and it's a growing problem in this province, as we've been talking about. Meanwhile, the housing that is affordable to folks often come at a cost to people's health and well-being. Damp units, poor ventilation, pests, mold, drafty windows are all very common. And because renters don't control the infrastructure, they're stuck with high bills and no power, literally or figuratively, to make changes. This hits especially hard on Indigenous and rural communities where energy systems are unreliable or maybe overpriced, and where crowded or inadequate housing is often widespread. Add in systemic poverty, and you're looking at a multi-layered crisis. All of this is fundamentally a human rights issue. Canada has committed under international law to ensure that everyone has access to safe, affordable, and adequate housing. This means homes that are not just affordable, but also habitable, warm, and dignified housing. Yet here in BC, far too many people are forced to live in conditions that fall well short of that standard, and it's often the most marginalized who carry the heaviest burden of that load. So we need to stop treating housing, energy, and poverty as separate silos, which means investing in energy-efficient, affordable housing, ensuring that social assistance rates reflect real living costs, and giving renters and communities more control over their future energy. Nobody should have to choose between paying rent and staying warm. Housing should be treated as a human right, including the right to a safe, comfortable, and energy-secure home. At the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition right now, we're working with city councillors across the province to enact housing as a human right legislation for British Columbia. No province or territory has yet done that, but legislative action is clearly needed to hold government to account on this issue. If you want to support this work in your communities, please come and talk to me after, or my colleague Sasha in the pink over here, because we're mobilizing folks to get out to city council meetings to pass some motions and bring it to UBCM. We also need to be scaling up and expanding retrofits, ensuring equitable access to cooling, and strengthening rent protections like vacancy control. Poverty reduction tools like increasing social assistance rates and ensuring access to a living wage can also help low-income people better access housing options that are adequate. Addressing these issues collectively as human rights issues, not just as economic or technical problems, is essential for building a more just and inclusive province. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question for Margaret. You mentioned about the climate change impact and your first-hand experience. What are the biggest climate resilience/human health risks that you are witnessing in your interactions with households that experience energy insecurity and poor quality housing in your work?
Okay, I can just say that in my interaction of with African newcomers household in the New Westminster, several interconnected human health risks are emerging due to the energy insecurity and substandard housing, a risk that are becoming more urgent as climate extreme intense. That is about respiratory and cardiovascular health risk, and I'm one of the lived experience with that, because I have a daughter who has asthma, and I remember with the heat, heat was inside the house all over, because my landlord could not switch off the heat, and that was in summer. That is when it was heat dome, and also outside it was smoke. So I remember I keep on just running in the emergency, because we could not tolerate, because the house that we are living, the house was out of windows, so we didn't have windows in that house. So with that, she developed a lot of respiratory illness, and that made me also having some mental issues, because that time when you're just being in that room, and you're not working, you're not going outside, and the bills, you have to pay the bills for that. So it made me get drained, and that is the most thing that I felt it affected me. Or not only me, because even the community that I'm working with, they are just they just being into the same situation. Working also with the elderly, I remember that is on 2021. One of the elderly man died next door, and he lived there for about he lived there like about 3 days, and he was my neighbor because that is the work that I've been doing. But that time I was taking my kids to the emergency. So I remember that time because I was not there. Because in my building, I used to go in every door. I have to knock every door for the seniors. I have to bring them down so that I can have at least the cooling station to the cooling station. I have to pay for them to go to the cooling station. So with all that, I felt bad because that elderly man died when I was not there, and he has to live there for about 3 days. And those are the things that I face. And when I'm just telling that there is mental issues, and also I can just talk about even the exposure to the heat during extreme weather events. There is a poorly installation, top floors units become dangerously hot in the summer, yet any household lack access to air conditioning. Language and systematic barrier also means that alert, cooling centers and emergency resources often do not reach these communities in time. Also, there is also a nutritional risk. Some of the families reduce the use of cooking appliances to save on electricity, resulting in limited or compromised meals. Inadequate kitchen ventilations further poses fire risk and indoors air quality hazard. So with all these health risks are not just symptoms of the poor housing, the systems of reflections of energy. So I believe with all that, those are the things that I feel it affects the community that I serve in the New Westminster.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Emily, there's a question. People are curious to know the outcome of your story. What were the tenants asking for, and what are some ideas that could have made the retrofit process better?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so ACORN, we took this on as a national campaign, and my colleagues worked hard, running around, door knocking in all of these Avenue Living buildings, building up tenant associations and organizing tenants who had been hit with these big rent increases to form local chapters so we could take on these issues as a group. I know that Alberta ACORN tried hard to get the attention of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, both to see if there was anything that they could do, even though the funding to Avenue Living had already gone out on their end, to put some pressure on Avenue Living to stop with the huge rent increases. Ultimately, because we were not getting a response and not getting meetings that we were asking for, this ended up escalating. When last summer, ACORN, we had our national convention in Toronto, and it actually so happened that the main office of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is also in downtown Toronto. So as part of our convention, we planned a march, and it ended with like 300 ACORN members occupying the lobby of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank until the CEO agreed to meet with us, which he did eventually, which was great. Very nice guy, and hope there was not any hard feelings in the long run. But it ended with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank doing their best to put some pressure on Avenue Living to cease with the rent increases, and also promising to bring in affordability covenants going forward. So that is what tenants were asking for. I mean, in the short term, they were hoping to not get the rent increases, which is difficult in Alberta's political climate. But in the long run, when we see the green retrofits come into buildings, tying affordability covenants to the funding that we give out, especially when it comes from taxpayers, is key to protect the affordability of the buildings and not displace people from their homes in the pursuit of making them more energy efficient.
Thank you. This one's an open question. For funding organization with limited budgets and staff capacity, how to prioritize efforts? What metrics, say income, demographics, and tenancy, are most effective? Whoever wants to take this one.
I think it depends on your goal of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to drive affordability, then you're going to look at what are the upgrades that can happen in a home specifically to drive affordability. It's not going to be a light bulb. It's not going to be a shower head. It's going to be weatherization. It's going to be insulation, maybe new windows. It's going to be some education. So I think it really depends on the goal, and whoever asked that, if they're anonymous or not, wants to clarify. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to answer that? That's okay. I've got another question. How do you overcome the power disparity when bringing community to the table? How do their voices actually get heard and supported?
Just to jump in, I think you need brave leadership from government and stakeholders that already have the power to be willing to invite community and spend the time and the resources to build the relationships, to Chris's point earlier, to start to shift some of that power. There's lots of examples of this happening across our sector, where governments are starting to recognize that in order to meet our climate goals, we do need to include everybody. And if we want to include everybody, that means we need to talk to the folks that we haven't traditionally talked to, and we need to bring them to the table. And so I think it's about time, relationships, to Dylan's quote, the trust, what was it? Trust moves at the speed of trust? No. You can only move at the speed of trust. That's the one. And the best time to start engagement and relationships was yesterday, and the second best time is today. So I think it's about showing up in community, not transactionally, not because you need something for them, but just showing up to listen and to start to build the relationships.
Do you want to go, Margaret? I could talk a bit about this and pass it to you, maybe? Sure, yeah. We do quite a lot of, we've done historically a lot of work with folks with lived experience, and things that are really important are food, like make sure there's healthy food where you're bringing people together, bus tickets to help people get to where they're, trying to get to and from where you are. I think the other thing that's like really challenging is that we often, come up with a project or a plan and we come into it and we're like, okay, great, we're gonna get this lived experience, they're gonna tell us what's good. We actually have to listen to what they say and do the things that they say, which is I think a barrier. We might have an idea of what it should look like, and then we hear something different, and then we're like, oh no. So I think including people and perspectives from the very beginning, before you're even coming up with the parameters of your project or your idea, is really important. Really valuing the people and building out relationally has been really important for us. And if you can, compensate people, because poor people, they don't have time. People are in food bank lines, they don't have time to skip the food bank, pick up their kid on the bus that's going to take them 3 hours through their commute to come to your 1 hour session in a neighborhood that's not accessible to them. I think there's a lot of ways that just basic human care can really go far. And then, you've got some amazing folks like Margaret who come in and have these brilliant ideas and are excellent speakers and know what can help. And so do those things, I think, is the second part of that. And then reporting back to community about how they've influenced what you're doing.
I'm lucky to have my boss. She did all.
Margaret's actually on our board of directors now, so she's our boss, actually.
Emily, do you want to?
She have said it, whatever.
Okay. Okay, this question's from Jofri. Has your understanding of energy justice shifted over the past few years? And where do you think it needs to go next, especially when it comes to shaping real-world interventions? Anyone can.
It's a good one. I'm going to take us on a path.
Okay.
My understanding of energy justice has shifted in terms of the tools that we can use to address it. And I'm going to talk about procurement. And if you had told me that I'd be on a stage talking about procurement, I would have been horrified. But over the last few years, I have really seen how procurement can have such a meaningful effect on the work that is done. There's not a report in the world that says that diversity isn't a good thing for our sector and for our communities. diversity brings better outcomes, better decisions, better program design, better communications, better marketing. And there are so many women-led organizations, minority-led organizations, indigenous-led organizations, Black-led organizations that could have a really meaningful impact on the diversity of our sector. In BC, between the province and the utilities, a rough estimate is that we spend $2 billion hiring consultants to do the climate work. That's a lot of money. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we are sitting here today saying, why can't Black, Brown, Indigenous people, why aren't they participating in the program? And we don't have Black, Brown, Indigenous people designing, delivering, doing the websites, creating the flyers. Those seem to me a really tight coincidence. And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of Buy Canada. Procurement policies are top of mind for everybody. I would love us to take that one step further and create social procurement. And this happens across the U.S. Across the U.S., where a percentage of procurement, so here in BC, BC Hydro or the province or Fortis will put out a bid to say, we need somebody to deliver this program or design this website or evaluate this. And it's a points-based system, so lots of the big consultants come out and they put their best foot forward. But unless they are motivated to pick up the phone and call that Indigenous-owned organization that builds websites, they're not going to do it. But if that procurement requires that 20%, 30% of the funds must go back into the communities that we are served, then they'll start picking up the phone. And that's, I think, to me, my understanding of energy justice, it feels like a really, quote-unquote, easy way for us to have meaningful change in our sector, to start to really prioritize that the economic benefit of climate work, a lot of people make a lot of money doing this work, let's get that into the communities that we are serving, because we'll get better programs. These communities will participate more because we have diversity, and we'll be creating these amazing jobs, and rooms like this will be more diverse. So there.
Thank you.
That's the journey.
I just wanted to respond to the part about where energy justice needs to go next. And I just wanted to take a minute to shout out the UBC Centre for Climate Justice. They have some really incredible work coming out on a right to cool framework for British Columbia that is looking at things, equitable protection for heat in a rapidly warming climate. It's imagining things through a lens of justice rather than charity. And I'm excited to see that come out. It's going to be coming out at the end of the month. And there's some folks from UBC Centre of Climate Justice here today, so you should talk to them about it. And I think next month we're also going to be doing an op-ed together, and so keep eyes out for that. But I think the idea of like a rights-based, like remembering human rights again is really important for where we're at right now, and like having a bigger arcing framework rather than sort of like one-time patchwork policies that are different in each municipality, I think is really important, and I'm really excited about that moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. This one's an interesting question. Are there specific technologies that lend themselves well to being used equitably? Thinking about tech that doesn't raise rents can be used in different building types.
Well, I mean, this, I'll be honest, is not my this is not my area of expertise. I do think, though, that at least when it comes to current tenant law in BC, there's probably not a magical technology that will be able to, electrify buildings or make them more energy efficient without raising rents. Because under the Residential Tenancy Act right now, it's very broad what can be charged back to tenants through an additional rent increase. Everything from replacing elevators to large-scale retrofits to even we've seen kind of cosmetic changes to common areas of the building have been passed on to tenants through rent increases, unfortunately. So I think that it's less about, at least from our side of things, from a tenant perspective, it's less about what specific technology would be a perfect fit to be able to retrofit buildings without raising rents, and more so about changing policy so that these costs are not ultimately borne by the tenants. We also, I'm sure many people in this room are much more familiar than me with the patchwork of grants and rebates and funding out there that building owners can apply for to do retrofits in their building. Unfortunately, under our current legislative framework in BC when it comes to tenant rights, it's possible, and I have run into certain landlords where we have suspicions that they're double dipping, as in they are applying for these grants or applying for this funding, they're doing the retrofit, and then they're also applying to raise the rents for tenants, to cover the cost of that. In our current system, it's up to the tenant to make that argument and to prove that the landlord could have, should have, or was eligible to get that funding elsewhere, which, as you can imagine, when you have on one side, $1 billion corporation who's hired a lawyer to fight this case, on the other side you have 12, tenants from various walks of life who have various, other things on their plate. The balance of that is very, inequitable and unequal. So we need to change our framework so that these retrofits are not passed on to tenants, or at minimum, landlords are not allowed to double dip, as we suspect in some cases that they are right now.
Thank you. One final question, and we got 2 more minutes. Any tips for gathering lived experiences and suggestions, but not actually having the power or political will to action their suggestions? Can you repeat the question? Yeah, sure. Any tips for gathering lived experiences and suggestions, but not having the power or political will to action their suggestions? This actually comes up a lot whenever we approach for research, engagement. The concern with building owners is that you might ask questions, but then there's no space to kind of apply those interventions.
I think if you don't have any sphere of influence to actually change the material realities or conditions of people's lives, you shouldn't be extracting resources from them of their time and labor. I think building relationships is always really important, especially if you're doing that reciprocally and providing people with some kind of support or service, or any kind of engagement you're doing with lived experience should benefit the people who you're engaging in some way. And so if you're just checking a box, I say probably don't do it.
Anybody else? Awesome. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for this great panel, and I'm so happy to kind of moderate this session. And thank you all. I'll pass it back to Dylan.
Thank you so much. Let's keep giving some more applause to this incredible panel. And Jofri, this was amazing. Thank you for your questions.